Hey everyone, and welcome to the next episode of Formulating with Courage. I'm your host, Zach Woods, the head of sales at Alchemy. I'm joined today by Dr. Alen Guy from IMCD Group. He is the global technical director for Pharmaceuticals. He's been there for slightly more than 10 years, or at the 10-year anniversary. Is that correct, Alen?
It's slightly more, 10 and a half. It's in that range. It's good.
Oh, 10, you're on the better half of 10, which means almost 11,
Yeah.
Especially if you're at a good company. And I think from everything I've learned in my exposure to IMCD, you guys have a really interesting organization. So for those that don't know Alen, I'll give a very, very brief introduction, and then we'll get right into it to start with questions. I think there's so many webinars out there that are filled with sort of filler, to be honest, and I want this to be impactful and useful for folks. And I know that you also have the same intent. So Alen, as I mentioned, is a PhD analytical chemist, nearly 20 years in the pharmaceutical space, and he has had nearly any role that a technical person in this world can have. So product manager, traveling technical expert, we all know what that means for those salespeople on the line, right? Sales guy, salesperson just takes the order. I'm kidding. And then most recently, obviously in his current role, he manages the global technical operations for IMCD's pharmaceutical group, which means working with tons and tons of principals in various regions and ultimately trying to formulate solutions for their customers. Alen, we're really happy to have you on the show. Thanks so much for participating here.
No, it's a real pleasure, Zach, to be able to talk to you a little bit about this topic as well. You're right, I've had a varied career over the last 20 years, but the last 10 years with IMCD, and just to put that into perspective, given that it's probably a fair guess, that's the most time I've spent with a single organization. It's been one of those rides with an organization that has challenged me at every year and challenged me in a positive way. So I've kind of enjoyed almost every new year as it's come forward. And I know that there's an old saying by the Queen of England, Annus Horribilis, from some time back, and 2020 is considered by many as one of those. But in its own way, it's presented challenges that have kept us really engaged with how we can at least keep this industry, not keep it going. It doesn't rely upon IMCD, but it's amazing how much of a part of that chain of supply and other things that we are. So luckily for us, our culture has been able to keep us going in that way.
Oh my God, he mentions culture. He doesn't even know what questions I'm going to be polling to the audience. So he's already on the topic. Just as a general housekeeping note for everybody, obviously we want this to be interactive. If anyone's attended a session before, these are interactive. There will be polling throughout the episode. One of them will be about culture, so don't steal my thunder, Alen. So please feel free to respond there. We're happy to get your input. And we also have the Q&A function. So anyone that's familiar with Zoom, and if you're not familiar with Zoom, you've been under a rock for 6 months, please feel free to type in anything you may be interested to ask either myself or Alen about culture, digitization, Scrum, Agile, et cetera, et cetera. So I want to start with the first questions, right? So I'm Bryant Gumbel, hard hitting. So I think obviously COVID has hit everyone in a really impactful way, right? Whether it was big ups or big downs. I think specifically, in my getting to know IMCD as an organization these past months, I've come to know that IMCD has in fact adjusted a lot of things because of COVID. And I think that given that a number of the folks on the call today are in fact suppliers or manufacturers, not necessarily in the distribution business, I think if you could name 2 specific examples that you feel like are great representations of that cultural shift that has been sort of brought about by COVID, or shifts in the business because of COVID, I think that would be interesting for people to hear about.
Yeah, and it's something that we talk about almost constantly internally as well, as what has COVID done for us. I guess it points to that question, is which has had the greatest influence on your digital transformation in 2020, the CIO or COVID-19? And I think this is been sort of where we're at. Yeah. One of the things that I guess we started a number of years ago, I don't think that this isn't a big secret. I've been asked this question before about our digital transformation. in essence, we recognized that in order to kind of deal with the way in which we were interacting with our customers, the way in which we needed to obviously represent and serve our principals, it required us to know more and to have the right tools and the right environment to be more effective in delivering our solutions to our customers. And that meant really embarking on a digital journey as well. One of the things about the digital journey has raised transparency levels between all parts of our organization, which is also great. I think this is, it de-silos an environment, and de-siloing an environment allows us to be a bit more entrepreneurial. It allows us to ask each other questions. And when COVID hit, there were a whole bunch of things that happened at the time that had an impact on us. Number one is, we weren't allowed to travel. So we needed to ensure that we had the right digital framework to still continue to engage with our customers and our principals. It was purely coincidental, but I don't mind. I'd rather be lucky than good under these circumstances. And so we had Teams, Zoom and Skype and all of those things. You might hear a whole line of quotes coming from me, but because I'm an avid reader. But the point is, we obviously had teams already in place. We then needed to kind of not just learn how to use it, but learn how to really use it. In other words, say, what's the big value point in this
or leverage it, if I may say, right? Not just use, but leverage it.
Yeah. You have to excuse me, I'm slightly on the left-hand side of the spectrum, so leveraging a negative situation is not the phrase I go with, but I actually 100% get your point. It was already in our thinking. We know we needed to do better engagement with our customers. Give our customers more channels for access to us rather than the other way around. A lot of customers and companies are still kind of traditionally driven. They want the visit, they want the relationship management, and there's a whole layer of people needing information that sometimes don't always get the access to the meeting, or even allowed to have the access to the meeting. But the digital network has allowed those people to be more engaged as well. So it's much easier to create more channels for information. And I think that's been a big boost for our relationship with our customers, because we were ready for that. And then it was just, it's the same old, you've got to make sure your marketing's ready as well, because it's a very, very open environment. You are immediately branded. There's no it's not like a nice quiet meeting in a one-to-one. It's all of a sudden, oh no, I've got to have the right image and so on. The second thing I think that needed to be really worked into there was this sense of resilience. Resilience is an underused word, but I think most of us are trying to now work with saying, okay, you know what, the first 3 months were kind of okay. I could stay home and I can work from home and I can do, then that second 3 months became, hang on, I miss people. I miss this kind of activity. So now I think a big part of our activity has to be inside the organization as well. So the digital transformation, the communication medium has to be there for us to support each other as we move forward. Obviously, we all want this to go away so we can travel again. I got a 2-month-old baby, so the travel's maybe not high, it's not my priority, but I think it's been very important that we didn't just look at it as some kind of mechanism and everybody would be fine. We had to be very human about our interaction with each other as well, and help people sort of really deal with their challenges day to day. I think that's an underplayed part of how a company works. And I think that comes through. If you're demonstrating that you're getting no support as an employee, then I think your customers will see that as well.
Yeah, it's interesting that you share this notion of support from a corporation, and I think obviously tech gets a really interesting rap and a very media forward rap about having very interesting ways of offering help and counseling and all those things. But help isn't just about how are you adjusting to this situation personally, it's how are you adjusting to this situation professionally, and what enablement is IMCD providing to the marketing person or or the technical expert to be able to get their job done, right? So a lot of our professional and personal lives are now more tangled together than ever. And I think that this notion of enablement is actually one that I know you guys are working on an interesting project to in fact enable your field sales reps to have more transparency about the products that you have in certain markets and the capabilities, which I think is really interesting. I want to come to my next question, which quite honestly, despite our interactions in the past, has been the biggest motivator for me to have you on the show today. And I think what I hope people really are tuning in now for, and that's Scrum. So we're going to talk about Scrum, and I'm going to frame up a couple of questions around this. So I want to preface by saying Alen is an analytical chemist. Alen is a PhD analytical chemist. Alen has always worked in a technical environment with small, medium, and large cap companies that sell and manufacture or now distribute products. And I am fascinated at your interest in Scrum because I can only say that coming from Evonik, I was really into, and I have to give props to the digital team of Evonik. They really grappled with the Agile Manifesto, and we really started owning, and I was taking Scrum master classes when I was there, and I just really felt inspired by the notion of that. But I would love to hear, what was your initial draw to Scrum? Was that before COVID? Was that during COVID? Has COVID just given you the opportunity to explore it? So first, what was your draw to Scrum? And two, how do you feel you're leveraging Scrum in your day-to-day work?
Right. Great question. There are a couple of parts to this, as you can imagine. I'll have to say, personally, my draw to Scrum as an overall interest point was seeded somewhat very directly by a young lady who joined our organization to work on a digital platform, shall I say, for us. And she came with this background in learning Python and working in project management. She's doing an MBA in knowledge management. And when I started using phrases like, oh, we're going to sprint this and we're going to do, she said, no, you need to tell me what you know about that. Yeah. And I was like, and then I said, you know what, you're right. I don't know as much as I should. So then I had the benefit of 4 weeks of reading around the topic, amongst other things, thanks to a bit of paternity leave. Okay, that's a different story.
We're not advising anyone have a child to learn Scrum, just as an asterisk here.
I was always interested, though, in the terms, but she really put me on the spot to get into it properly. What happened, obviously, through the digital process and digitalization, the transformation, we had a lot of more IT people coming in. I became more involved with B2B, with the CRM platform, and so on. And the process of launching and then upgrading and enhancing that. And I thought, you know, these regular updates, there's something that's coming from something. Yeah, it's coming from a process. And what is that process? Your backlogs, whatever it may well be. Yeah. Then I started reading around it. And first off, I read the manifesto, number one. And I thought, there's nothing in this manifesto. Okay, the original version in this manifesto does refer, of course, to software.
Correct.
But if you look at how it's evolved in some of the authors around the topic, Jeff Sutherland amongst them, it deals more with trying to understand, well, is there more application to this? And I initially just would poo-poo it as an IT tool. But when I saw that it's individuals and interactions over processes, it's products that actually work over documentation, customer collaboration instead of contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan, these all resonate with me as like, well, isn't that obvious how we should be working as part of our humanity? Yeah. I've always been anti investment. There's another book, is it Think Fast, Act Slow, Think Fast?
Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman.
That's right. But one of the things I always come back to him for was people getting this sunk cost in a plan.
Yeah,
and then you relate that out. People fall in love with a plan, and then the plan becomes more important than the thing.
The plan is the plan.
Yeah, and then worse, when you hit the road with that plan and it doesn't work, the sunk cost keeps you there. and you don't respond to change, you're not dynamic enough. And I think actually, you know what, I would never take that route in formulation. I would never take, if I saw something, it didn't work, and I could understand and explain why it didn't work, I wouldn't then try to persist and prove that it didn't work again.
Absolutely.
Yeah?
Absolutely.
Move on to something that does work or shows more signs of working. So in reality,
Absolutely.
for me, it complements scientific method. Not necessarily the scientific plan. I accept in science we have things run sometimes in a very linear fashion, because you can't make a tablet without the powder. So you need the powder first, and you need to plan that, and then the powder makes the tablet, and then the tablet is coated, and the coated tablet is tested. You can't somehow sprint the coating before you've got the powder. Yeah, that's not how that's going to work for you. But there could be other means to do it. What I didn't realize, though, is that I actually came across agile methodology quite by accident last summer in doing something called hackathons. Now, a hackathon is a very familiar term to IT experts, totally unfamiliar to me. But the purpose of the hackathon was to assess our customer intimacy, look at our customer service profiles. And actually what we did is we democratically got people into rooms, gave them 90 minutes and asked them 3 questions. What works well? What's not working well? And if you could change one thing, what would it be?
Oh my God, and that's agile.
Agile. That's agile, and that's really very much on the retrospective side as well. It's also potentially in daily stand-up meetings. And I've used it effectively in a number of environments, whether that's in a formulation forum with my team. What worked well, what didn't work well? How do we now say, well, how do we improve that? Well, asking those questions mean that you're intrinsically looking for the value. What is the value thing that we need to deliver? Not what is the pretty thing that we need to deliver. I'm a big fan of blue sky, but I tell you what, blue sky ends if it becomes a money pit. Yeah, there's got to be some rationale to that. And I think the Scrum overall, the agile methodology, and then the Scrum and the essence of a Scrum Master and a product owner, really great things to me, because they keep their eye on the ball, and they're dedicated to delivering a product. Dedicated, and that's what got me. That's what got me into it.
And you actually answered both parts of the question sort of in your explanation of what got you into it, which is you find that you guys are using Scrum literally in the lab, also in the conceptualization of what should be in the lab, what projects should we bring into the lab. And I can only say I think it's truly awesome that you've taken this seemingly software specific concept and been able to apply it. And you're not alone in that. Certainly other organizations not in the IT space are doing so. But I also thought there was a nice compliment in there. And we can be hard on internal IT organizations. And I want to make sure to asterisk, you didn't know that you gave a compliment, but I think I found one, which was, you said, I recognized how are they delivering to me these consistent updates all the time? How am I getting that? And what a great question. I mean, how many of us, and I can certainly speak for myself in this, even at my company, right, a smaller organization, that there is a certain level of expectation that IT has presented that of course you get an update every 2 weeks about the new system. Right now, we perceive that unfortunately as an annoyance, but can you imagine if a customer in the field looking to run a trial with one of your products was able to get that type of iterative feedback? I mean, it's a totally next generation concept. So I'm going to ask a 2-packer for the audience. I have 2 questions that are going to come up in a poll. So I'm launching poll 1 now. And you're going to see, and I've intentionally, just so you know, not given the definitions. Alan, you're also welcome to participate in this. I've not given the definitions to lean startup, agile, Scrum, design thinking. And the reason I have not is because you may well not have a clue what these are, in which case you say none of the above, if you could. However, you can pick multiple ones of these. So if your organization is in fact leveraging something like a design studio, you may be using both lean startup as well as design thinking and agile/Scrum. Alan, I think you guys, from my experience, would definitely fall into agile Scrum. I don't know about the design thinking quite as much, and I don't think the lean startup, but you obviously participate and let me know if I'm wrong. Let's keep this running for 15 more seconds, and then we're going to hit with the second question that's related to this, but not directly overlapping. And Alen, I take this input, and I'll actually reveal the polling results here in a moment for everyone, because I think it's an interesting opportunity for you to speak on. If there's one that has no adoption and you feel strongly that it's a great benefit, I'd love to have you sing the praises. Interestingly, Agile has some quite low results. So I'm going to end the poll on that one. So let me then launch number 2. Agile came in with 2 of 15 participants said Agile was being used, which was 50% less than the next lowest one. So quite interesting that it seems IMCD is kind of ahead of the curve on that. So I wanted to come to a second question, and I'm asking this one because it's an inverse way of asking Alen a question. So I'm going to ask the audience to share. Given the importance of culture, Alen, you cheated earlier. You mentioned culture, which I think was great. We've seen and actually heard during our last conversation with Henrik Hahn, the inaugural episode, how important culture is to the adoption of change. Which of the methodologies have you all taken on inside of the organization that you see most effective for cultural change? And is that a top-down approach, directives coming from the C-suite, a bottoms-up approach? So individuals just kind of go out on their own, they create some MVP or a concept, and they take it up through the layers of leadership. Is it an outside-in approach? Obviously, Alen, I think you guys know a little bit about this one, working with outside firms or outside concepts and bringing things in. Or is it an inside-out approach where you are creating concepts or even companies internally and then spinning those out into subsidiaries of the holding group? So we're getting, to be honest, we adapt poorly to change. I love that. And I put that intentionally because I think, unfortunately, a lot of these conversations, they sort of skip the point, right? Which is they assume that everyone has already gotten on the boat and is on their way to the new world, right? And not everyone's on the Mayflower, right? We're trying to get people on the Mayflower, and then we can get to the new world. But until we put you on the boat, it's really hard to get to the new world. So, Alen, what I'm seeing is a bottom-up momentum builder, and I'd love to, if you have an anecdotal story around a bottom-up initiative, or maybe to take it conversely, I want to give it kind of open-ended. If you've seen a top-down initiative, something I know IMCD is working in some corporate groups on top-down, I'd love to hear one anecdote of either a bottoms-up initiative or a top-down initiative in high-level terms, no specifics, that you've seen be successful within the organization. And that could either be during COVID times or in the past.
That's a really interesting question, because when I look at all of those options, I think that IMCD at some point in the last 5 years, in relation to whether it's digital transformation or other things, has kind of utilized something there to make it work. And all encompassed in one bottom, the one bottom one. In other words, whether it's been top down or bottom up or inside out or outside in, there's still this challenge with adopting and to change. And that adoption to change comes from almost none of the singular points that you've highlighted, because anybody, if the C-suite wants it, yeah, they're insisting on a change. If the bottom up from operational staff wants it, then there's other layers or parts of the group that may be finding it difficult to adopt. An anecdote, poor. Well, I guess that CRM, in a sense, came from a C-suite type environment, so in the case of our CRM, I think we probably did a really effective global rollout in under 18 months, including many acquisitions that we undertook in that process. And I think that any kind of digital system that involves CRM and obviously our ERP that actually works in a such short period of time across multiple levels is certainly a success. by the way, I don't measure success as 100%. Yeah, it's successful as in the benefits far outweigh any potential negative that occurred in that period. It's tough to give you a science-based one, because I think we're in the middle of one right now.
You're at the cusp.
I'm at a cusp of one, and it'd be unfair to describe that. So I think overall, from our organization, the thing that really drove some of the more of the cultural elements was the CRM. And the reason why that drove some of the cultural elements is IMCD has grown from being a European organization to a global organization in the last 10 years.
Absolutely.
And that in order to really get the great channels of communication through, you can't always just rely on emails and telephone calls and even emails to a degree. You need something a little bit more. Even I think messaging and chatting is more tactile than an email. An email is just a letter to me. So I think that we had to really look closely at how we want to be as an organization, and culturally it was open and transparent, not to upset our suppliers with disclosing confidential information. That's a given. We would never do that, but with each other. And the CRM for the first time was truly global, and that allowed us to really at least overcome some of the adoption issues and some of the challenges associated with that. But it's like anything, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them all drink.
Can't make it drink. Yeah.
But isn't that the same with any project in most cases? What I will say about, and I'm going to pay the compliment to IT again, and I know I'm eating into the conversation, but I learned something about backlogs and Jira and so on. And one of the things that I value is having a long and good memory. So I remember and keep the questions of those early non-adopters saying, I don't have this and I don't have that. And then when it comes to a release, I go, you do now. Yeah, you do now.
Awesome.
This is the end of it. So use it, guys. So yeah, CRM, largely driven by a C-suite environment, but actually deep-seated in a cultural need for a globalizing organization.
So the clarity there is really helpful, and I think that compliments to IT are welcome. We're happy to hear those, right? It's really cool. We think IT matters too, so that's good. I want to ask, and you've mentioned it now a few times, and I think it's really worth diving into, and you actually prefaced it with something that I think is really, a lot of people may not know, right? So if you've been in the industry, which a lot of the people attending in the specialty chemical industry tends to be one that keeps people around for a while. So you said IMCD has grown from a Netherlands-based company 20 years ago to a European company 10 years ago to a global company in the last 10 years. I'm very interested to learn, you obviously have not always worn the IMCD colors, and this is not a question to downgrade or belittle any other organization's culture. I'm interested in focusing on, if you had to identify, and I'm not going to give you one or two things, but what is it about IMCD's culture that has enabled this type of learning attitude, this type of ability to adjust in dynamic settings? Because quite frankly, Alen, COVID is just another change in the world, right? There are always changes. There may be a new pharma regulatory event or something like that. And I think you have a really interesting perspective to share here, because you've worked at a lot of suppliers or principals. I'd love to get that insight from you.
Okay. Yeah, and sometimes the question is still occasionally troubling internally in myself, but I guess the basic answer to that question is that it values entrepreneurialism and freedom to act. Yeah, one of the pieces of advice I give my colleagues, team members, whoever it may well be, is don't wait to be asked to do something, put your hand up. What can I contribute? And therefore, this is why sometimes you can get inside out traction from a project. Yeah, and you can demonstrate it. One of the great things about being global and local is we've got a global viewpoint, and in pharma we need a highly globalized strategy in terms of how we treat our customers, but we can have local nuances. In other words, the guys at the ground level have the awareness of the tools that they're available to them to use in the way they see fit at the ground level for their customers, very specifically their customers. Yeah, so even if I go and work in Indonesia or in China or wherever it may well be and work with these customers, the very first question I ask when that's finished is I look at the sales manager and say, did I do okay for you? Was this what you wanted from the relationship with this customer? It wasn't like, I think they liked it. It was like, no, come on, give me some honesty here.
Iterative culture, right? How do I ask you and get feedback in real time? Feedback culture maybe is a better word.
Definitely grown over the last couple of years in this regard, and we've needed to have it to sustain that sense of the entrepreneurialism and the freedom to act. I'm conscious that there is a question, and I want to get to that if I may before we get
absolutely
to the discussion. So I'm just keeping that one in mind because it's sort of to this point as well that I'm making about the fact that pharma is this regulated industry, but we've still got freedom to act because not all pharma is the same. And what I mean by that is every customer is trying to make money, and if we're all trying to make money in the same pot, then it's a bit tricky. So you've got innovators, you've got people who need to copy the generics, you've got nutraceutical environment, people who are working. I think COVID has raised the specter of immune system and self treatment and so on. Our role, if I was to be really direct on that, my role, and the one I actually enjoy the most, is being able to get to solutions quickly for our customers that fit the regulatory bill. So I'm kind of half answering this question that's in this section, but I've got the freedom to do that. And what that means is I can work with the local people and be connected to them to say, right, give me feedback. What works here? What doesn't work here? How do I get you the best solution? We don't do diktats. Yeah. Oh, it's granulation, therefore it must be this. It's like, well, we've got some options. Let's explore those options, but quickly. And let's work with the customer, because I like the other part of Agile is fail fast. Yeah. If you're going to fail fast, and be ready not with the next solution, because it doesn't last forever, but learn from that failure quickly. And if you win, make sure the customer understands why that worked. Yeah, these are parts of it. I think I don't know if I'd answered your question per se, but the whole of the business kind of respects that. It's got freedom to act. It's got great scientists, and we give them the chance to think and interact with the people who need to actually do the work. I don't know any other way to answer that question.
Yeah, I think to distill it, an action-oriented culture, right? I mean, so some cultures just have a fear of failure culture, right? The culture is one that doesn't necessarily, and I want to emphasize, right? Of course, like we're a startup, we're trying to change some things in the R&D delivery of products. Okay, great. But that doesn't just mean go out and partner with startup companies, right? A fear of failure, it also means, what if you have an interesting concept around how to market your own products better, right? That has nothing to do with the startup. But if your organization doesn't have the attitude that new ideas are welcome, not only are they welcome, they're cataloged, indexed, shared, promoted, endorsed, ranked, prioritized, and then executed. That was a lot of words, and they all made sense. I'm happy. I think you're going to be stuck in a rut. It doesn't mean you're damned to a destination of failure, but it's going to be difficult for the best ideas to come to the surface fast.
And that's why, and I'm going to come back now to Agile and Scrum. And this is the thing about that really caught my attention. When if I sit in a conversation one-to-one with somebody, there's a very grave danger that I'm just going to either reinforce bias between myself and this other person, because I'm more likely to call somebody who's going to possibly agree with me. Yeah, I want to talk to you about something. Yeah, and then you reinforce a bias. Actually, what I look about Scrum and Sprint means you put everybody in the box. Yeah, not just your personal relationships or your friend, your favorite formula.
The customer, the producer.
Yeah, you put everybody in the box, and your developers, the people who are formulating, your scientists, and say, right, guys, this is the question we need to answer, or this is whether it's a concept for formulation, whether I think I'm gonna challenge the system and say, look, we've got to give a response to a customer that needs a solution. How do we then, as a group, sprint that and then provide the mechanism by which to give the best route to that answer. So rather than trying to do everything, is say, right, let's do the test that deliver the value, and that will either say, okay, this is given as the first part, which is done, yeah, and now we move on to the next part and say, right, okay, first part possibly feeds the second part, an update to the concept, an update to the work, whatever it may well be, but it focuses on delivering a product or delivering a result. It doesn't, and value, it doesn't focus on just testing. Yeah. Testing as in testing everything because it's in a long list of testing protocols. I've got all this equipment, therefore I'm going to use it. Well, if you don't need all the equipment to demonstrate it works, don't use all the equipment. Yeah, it just wastes time. So for me, Agile and Scrum is also a way of managing waste.
I love this notion, and perhaps it's a worthwhile note to end on, because I want to be respectful of people's time. We really try to keep conscientious of time, which is, I think, for me, I hear and I feel that a lot of people here, both on this call and in general, they hear the terms Agile, Scrum, design thinking, and unfortunately, they stop at the terms and they are sort of turned off by the terms, and they don't get to what's the point. And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I've gotten from your sort of insight here is Scrum is about a delivery mindset. It's about what are we delivering to their internal stakeholders, to our external stakeholders, to our own internal organization, whatever the case might be. So it is not the end, it is a means to an end. It just promotes the best deliverable, be that a marketing collateral, be that an R&D tool, be that whatever it is, actually gets to the customer. Did I get that right?
That's 100%. It's really focusing on the value in the product. Yeah, we're working on a principle that our product should not be wrong, but if it doesn't have everything, it will the next iteration. That's the thing. We will continue to grow and continue to provide answers for our customers in a timely and frankly quick way, without being false. But I like the big brain theory. I'd rather spend 90 minutes with my brains, as in my group, really getting the 80 or 90% of the actionable story out, than giving them a 3-week period to kind of jot down their ideas, because I still need to ask them to value those ideas. I think, well, Let's do that first off, because you're going to give your most valuable answer is going to be your first one or your second one, and they're the ones I like to go for.
So speaking of delivery, let's give everybody a chance to go deliver for their own organizations, take the motivation of what they've gotten today. For everybody that joined, thanks so much. Alen, thank you so much for participating. Folks, when I wrap the webinar, there's going to be a very brief type form. I think it surreptitiously pops up on your Google Chrome browser or whatever browser you're using. If you could, we'd really appreciate your feedback. We've gotten a lot of great traction here on these concepts, and we'd love to know what you think of it, what you'd like to see, what you'd like to cut. And for now, we're going to sign off. So again, Dr. Alen Guy, thank you so much. I really enjoy getting to know IMCD and you better, and appreciate your input on Scrum and the delivery mindset.